Yeah, hello everybody. I'm happy to welcome Ghislaine Dunant and her translator, Kathryn Lachman, this evening. First, this is a significant opportunity to recall the work and life of an exceptional personality, Charlotte Delvaux. She's one of the writers associated with the writing about Auschwitz. Well, even if we can say so, because, well, what does it mean to this writing about Auschwitz as if it were a literary genre? It's always difficult to speak this way because, of course, only text, only witnesses such as Primo Levi or Charlotte Delvaux can really write from Auschwitz. Until now, there was a kind of imposter or taboo in wanting to write literary about Auschwitz, as if it were just another subject among others, as if it could be represented without question. But today, Klaus man is dead, and these ethical and literary questions seem outdated. It's no longer shocking that some books make literature beautiful images about Auschwitz. The taboo has been broken. This is why it's essential to return to witnesses like Charlotte Delvaux, such as Charlotte Delvaux, which allows us to distinguish between the literature of the concentration camps on the one hand and the pornography of representation on the other. I'm also happy to welcome Ghislaine Dunant for herself, because she's a writer who has written important novels such as L'Impudeur, Gallimard 1989, translated into English in 1986, and Un effondrement, published by Grasset in 2008. Today, she's here to talk about her biography of Charlotte Delvaux, published in 2016 by Grasset and just translated by Kathryn Lachman, Charlotte Delvaux, A Life Reclaimed, at University of Massachusetts Press. Kathryn is an associate professor in comparative literature at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and author of Borrowed Forms, The Music and Ethics of Transnational Fiction. So please join me in welcoming Ghislaine and Kathryn.
I would like to thank François Dunant for his invitation à la Maison Française. I'm very happy to be here. It's also an honor to be here. And I want to thank Kathryn Lachman, my translator, for having organized this talk, and Courtney for the administration and her help. So, Kathryn.
So, thank you for coming out on such a beautiful evening. Thank you, François, for the kind introduction. And we are very happy to be here today to talk to you about this very significant literary event that was the publication in French in 2016 of this magisterial literary biography of Charlotte Delvaux by Ghislaine Dunant. It was an honor to translate the work. And the way we'd like to proceed tonight is I'll remind you about Charlotte Delvaux if you know her already, or tell you a little bit about Charlotte Delvaux. Then we'll read a passage from the book in French and then in English. Then we will have a conversation about Delvaux and interweave one more reading from the text and open it finally to your questions. So Delvaux, for those of you who don't know her, was born in 1913. She was deported to Auschwitz on the convoy of January 24th, 1943. One of two convoys of political prisoners to be sent from France to Auschwitz. They were the only two convoys, and to this day, historians do not understand why they were sent there. Charlotte and her companions survived, well, Charlotte survived 27 months in the concentration camps, but only 49 of that convoy returned. And she went on to write about the camps, about the question of survival, about the deportation, and to contest instances of oppression all over the world. She wrote, notably, "None of Us Will Return," immediately after coming back from the camps, and then 20 years later, wrote "The Convoy to Auschwitz," "The Belles Lettres," a series of editorials and letters about the Algerian War, 2 other volumes that constitute what became her trilogy, Auschwitz and After, so Useless Knowledge and also The Measure of Our Days, countless plays, and then ultimately a very important book about memory and survival and the experience of many different perspectives on the camps in Days and Memory. So we'll begin now with a short reading from Ghislaine's book. And Courtney, would you, thank you for the slide.
Je commence. Elle a jour et nuit senti l'odeur que dégageait la fumée des cheminées de Birkenau. Elle a appris, comme ses compagnes après quelques semaines, le sort des Juifs, les chambres à gaz avant le crématoire. La situation de son bloc, qui se trouvait dans la partie 2A du camp, comme la situation des voies en 1943 par rapport au camp, ne pouvait pas lui permettre d'assister à l'arrivée d'un convoi, ni le trajet que faisait tous les jours sa colonne pour aller travailler au Marais ou au chantier de démolition des maisons abandonnées. Je me suis longtemps demandé comment Charlotte Delbo avait vu, quand, où, jusqu'au jour où j'ai trouvé dans le livre de souvenirs d'une de ses compagnes la trace de ce moment. Conduite chaque jour de Birkenau à Rheisgau, où 6 d'entre elles commençaient à travailler au laboratoire agricole avant que des logements y soient construits, elles empruntaient un chemin qui passait par la voie du train. Un jour de juin, leur colonne fut arrêtée longtemps par l'arrivée d'un convoi. Elles étaient là, à quelques mètres de la Seine. Elles assistèrent à la descente du train de toutes les familles. Et à la différence de ce qu'il s'est passé pour leur arrivée à elles, il y avait des camions qui attendaient près des voies. Les chambres à gaz étaient à l'autre bout du camp, c'est-à-dire loin. Et puisque tous s'étaient trompés quant à la destination du train, camp de relégation, camp de travail, le camion était là pour soulager les plus faibles qui y montaient d'autant plus facilement. Ce que Charlotte a sous les yeux, c'est soudain le contre-champ de la fumée qui sortait des cheminées, de l'odeur atroce et écœurante dont elle savait parfaitement l'origine. Mais entre savoir et voir, il y a un monde. Soudain, elle a les personnes devant les yeux, leur réalité, ce qu'elle comprend de leur vie en les regardant. Regarder comme sait le faire Charlotte. Regarder et comprendre très vite à qui elle a affaire. Regarder, voir les attitudes, les vêtements, les gestes et savoir les interpréter. Et son imagination lui ouvre leur vie passée. L'ampleur de la catastrophe est là pour elle qui sait, à regarder les hommes, les femmes, les enfants, les familles descendre du train. La compréhension de ce qu'il se passe, de l'ampleur du crime est dans cette scène, elle s'imprime. Et quand elle commence à écrire son livre, la scène arrive en premier. C'est la première chose à dire d'Auschwitz. Elle vient en premier, elle s'impose. Je n'avais pas le moindre plan en tête. Il ne s'agit pas d'une décision, c'est une évidence. C'est une intuition intérieure qu'elle suit, à laquelle elle se fie avec confiance. L'ordonnance des scènes prend sa place, il lui semble qu'elle l'écoute, elle qui a toujours fait confiance à la voix, qu'elle sait si bien écouter et entendre, elle sent qu'elle-même pour contenir une voix qui est la distillation de tout ce qu'elle a vu et vécu dans son corps, dans son psychisme, dans son âme, et qu'elle va laisser s'échapper au fil des chapitres, oui, avec cette mesure intérieure, une balance pour le poids et la résonance des mots et des phrases qui peuvent dire, car elle est sûre qu'on peut dire, et qu'il n'y a pas d'autre tâche à accomplir qu'à écouter la voix intérieure qui attend et lui donne forme. Elle décrit l'arrivée comme pour faire remonter à la vie.
Day and night, Charlotte inhaled the odor of the smoke sent up from the Birkenau chimneys. She and her companions discovered after several weeks the fate of the Jews, the gas chamber, followed by the crematorium. Her barracks location in Section 2A of the camp and the position of the train tracks in 1943 would not have enabled her to witness the arrival of a convoy, nor would she have seen it from the path her column took every day to work in the swamps or on the demolition sites of abandoned houses. For a long time, I wondered how Charlotte had seen it. When? Where? Then one day I found a trace of this moment in one of her companion's memoirs. Every day, 6 of the deportees were escorted from Birkenau to the agricultural lab in Reisko, where they had started working before on-site housing could be built. The path they took went by the train tracks. One June day, their column was stopped for a long time by the arrival of a convoy. There, a few meters from the scene, they witnessed all the families getting off the train. And unlike what had happened at their own arrival, trucks were waiting near the tracks. The gas chambers were at the other end of the camp, far away, and since nearly everyone had been deceived as to where the train was headed, a transit camp or a labor camp, the truck was there to assist the weakest, who climbed in all the more readily. What Charlotte suddenly saw before her eyes was the direct counterpart of the smoke coming from the chimneys, the atrocious and sickening smell whose origin she knew all too well. Yet there is a world of difference between knowing and seeing. Suddenly, she saw people before her eyes, their reality, what she could fathom of their lives simply by watching them. Charlotte watched as she knew how to do. She watched and understood very quickly whom she was confronting. She watched, she saw attitudes, clothing, gestures, and knew how to interpret them. Her imagination opened a window into their past lives. The full extent of the catastrophe was right there for someone who knew by watching the men, women, children, and families get off the train. Her awareness of what was happening, of the magnitude of the crime, is etched in the scene. And when she began to write her book, it came first. It was the first thing that had to be said about Auschwitz. It was obligatory. I didn't have the slightest plan in mind. It was not a decision. It was self-evident. She followed her intuition and trusted it faithfully. The sequence of scenes fell into place as though she were listening to a voice, just as she had trusted Jouvet's voice, which she was so attuned to hearing and understanding. She felt that she too contained a voice that distilled everything she had seen and experienced in her body, psyche, and soul. A voice she gradually let out in successive chapters, using an inner gauge to measure the weight and timbre of her words and sentences capable of expressing it. For she was convinced it could be expressed, and she had no other task to accomplish other than listening to that inner voice and giving it form. She describes the convoy's arrival as if to bring it back to life. So, Ghislaine, writing this book was a monumental undertaking, and you devoted many years of your life to it. And I would like to start by asking you, what was it in Charlotte's elbow that drew you to her work and to give this amount of energy and intense work and research and writing? Why did you take on this project?
I would say first, it's Auschwitz. For me, I would say it was a hole in my humanity. And I read some books, the most major literary books about Auschwitz or concentration camp. I wrote Primo Levi, I read Imre Kertész, I read Elie Wiesel. But when, and it was late in my life, when I read Charlotte Delvau's book, something completely different happened for me. For the first time, when I read her sentences, I find that I could relate me to what happened there. I would say that also that the whole I felt even in my body would be recousu, how you say
sewn, repaired, sewn.
Repaired or sewn, because her sentences, the shape she gave to paragraph, to the scenes, all her literary forms, make visible, make sensitive what all these women who were in Birkenau endured. And I don't, at the same thing, on the other hand, I consider Charlotte Delvaux as the only writer that is in French literature able to depict pain and sufferings as she did, and all sorts of sufferings. I mean physical sufferings, but also moral pain and different moral pain. I mean, when you receive violence, when you are treated with indignity, but also the pain in the eyes of Charlotte or of the companions when they saw the others in their conditions. And almost in the same sentence, Charlotte succeeds to write about the pain which is endured and also the moral pain that she suffered to see what she sees. And this, I would say, utterly success, I don't know, cette façon si pointue de...
This very precise and detailed way.
Because what is also very interesting in her writing, that she is capable to write with such a lucidity the violence that was there, and at the same time she is able to give love to those she described, in this most terrible situation, what they are enduring out of unimaginable. She never cut the link between herself and them. And this conjugation, this mixture,
this confrontation
with it's together love and lucidity and violence is in her expression, because among all the writers that wrote on Auschwitz-Birkenau, she is the most violent, I would say. It's a harsh scenes.
And this is also because of all the other writers. She was at Birkenau.
Exactly, as you
the
said.
most
exactly
terrible of the camps. And you described that there is actually no water at Birkenau, and this is one of the terrible hardships.
Yes, and as Herman Langbein told in Nuremberg at the trial, that if Auschwitz had a certain order, Birkenau was a jungle, and in Birkenau there was no asphalt.
There was no pavement. It was just muddy alleys.
So it was earth. So it was mud in spring when the snow, and no sanitary, almost, or 1 for 10,000 women. It was incredible. So, and the block, there were 100, and the condition was absolutely terrible, and even the Severine, the surveillante,
the supervisor.
The supervisor,
Lachman.
and Rudolf in his memory said that in Birkenau we received the worst answering from Ravensbrück, and they came to Birkenau. So their way of being was absolutely awful towards the prisoners.
So you've talked about how not only was Birkenau the most terrible of the camps, but also the violent representations, the force of her language in representing that experience is really unlike any of the other writers. But I would like to get you to talk about your encounter with Delbo's work as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's quite remarkable about this book is the way you begin it. You begin with a very interesting prologue, a very personal prologue, where you are walking in the garden at Berthaud, Charlotte Delbo's country house, and looking to see what of Charlotte Delbo you can find there. It's a very interesting decision to begin like this, because after this prologue, you then go to 1940 with the imminent arrival of the Germans, the exodus from Paris. Could you talk about what it means for you as a writer to confront this material, and why this beginning?
You know, when I write this book, the book I wrote before, it was only novel. So it's a certain way of write. So you have to, for me, you have to give an atmosphere to the reader when he begins the book, something which will catch him. And for me, and also you have to give something important in the scene. And I wanted to give many different things, I would say. First, I wanted, when I went to Berthaud, which was her country house, she bought, and it was unexpected for her to buy this house. And in an extraordinary way, this house was a very little railroad station. And she is the only writer who calls Auschwitz the biggest railroad station in the world. And I was very surprised when I met the person, her friends, or person who knew her, that everybody that she liked, that their friends come into Berthaud. And when they are there, and everybody speak to me about this house, keeping the vocabulary of the station. You know, we stay on the platform, we had dinner in the waiting room. Charlotte's room was la billetterie, where you send tickets. I found that so funny. And in fact, about when I was there, I think that she bought the smallest the smallest station, railroad station in the world. And for me, it was so, it was such like a light suddenly. Nobody was conscious of that. She didn't never talked of that. And for a reason, and a very interesting reason, that buying this house, and during all the years she had this house, what she wanted to do, that the person in the village came and find again the memory of the station where they took the train for the army, for the First World War, for the Second World War. So they took the train with lots of emotion, with their family there, and it was the station. But so they asked Charlotte when they come, may I have a seat on the platform, on the bench, or may I come in your séjour? But it was the waiting room, and Charlotte was very happy of that, and it was very important for her. At the point that I discovered that she, when she bought this house, it was a hunting lodge since 15 years. So you didn't find the name of the station on the wall. But Charlotte went to a shed in the garden and she found the nameplates. She took them and she put on the wall. So she wanted the station. And that's for me something extraordinary, but not for a revival, a conscious revival. For also in the village, that people find something again. And the station was not in the center of the village, but almost 2 kilometers from the center. So, voila. And that's something was important. And what I went to Breteau because I wanted to find something about her. Because I have to confess that I liked very much, I absolutely want to make this woman, her books known, because when I began my work, it was in 2010. She wasn't almost unknown. And I wonder why, and I wonder who was this woman able to write such books. I didn't know. And when I read her books, her sentences, during 1.5 years, I asked myself what I will be able to tell, to write about these sentences. They are so strong that it's enough. So when I went to Breteau 1 year after beginning, I hope I will find, a thread to follow that, to understand, but I didn't find it. And I wanted to give also this enigma at the beginning of my book, and this part of mystery that was in front of this house. Nobody came there from many years. It was not an abandoned house, because there was new shutters on the windows, and I saw that all the pictures, they haven't shutters on the windows, but the grass was very high, and so nobody was there. So it was mystery. And also that was important because I collect so many facts about her life. But in fact, I think that the person, and I wanted that, keep her mystery of a person. So all this mixture made my beginning, what I call the opening of the book, like for music, you have an opening. And then my first chapter, I didn't begin with childhood. Even you won't find in my book the day of her birth and the day of her death. Each time, each event, I give their age, because it's about her life and what she lives that I wanted to tell, to talk. but in June 1940, when the German came in Paris, Jouvet left Paris. She had no more work. And after peripéties,
I think we need to fill in some background for people who may not know this about Charlotte Delbo, but that she was working alongside Louis Jouvet, a very important director, preeminent film actor of his day, who was at the Théâtre Athénée in Paris. And this was the man for whom Charlotte was the personal assistant right before the war. She became his personal assistant through a story that Ghislaine recounts in the book, whereby her husband, Charlotte, was, as a young woman, very much involved with the Communist Party's youth activities, the Open University. She was able to take classes with Henri Lefebvre. She was writing along with her husband, who was the managing editor, the editor-in-chief of the Cahiers de la Jeunesse, one of the communist publications. She was writing features, and she was sent to interview Jouvet. And at this interview, you describe how taken he was with her capacity to render his speech, which was a very artistic, expressive, searching speech in a very writerly language that he could recognize, and he hired her. And so when this opening, you talk about 1940, she leaves Paris because Jouvet has left Paris, because the Germans are in Paris or at the gates of Paris, and everybody is trying to flee. And this is an important moment in Delbo's life.
And after 2 months, only will is to reopen the Athénée. She, from the house of her parents in the suburbs of Paris, she, as soon as the trains will run again, she took the train every 2 days and come to Paris, to l'Athénée, and to the Conservatory of Art Drama, where Jouvet gave his lessons. And she wanted to know if it's reopened or not. And what is extraordinary is why I begin with that she decided to by herself to reopen the Athénée. And she wrote to Jouvet, you will me engueuler, you will be
yell at me
angry
if you want
when you come back. But I want that French, and I would say French literature at the Conservatory, that you may hear it again when in Paris you only hear German, when the signals in the panels in the street are in German, the clocks, it's German hours. And so yeah, I think it's their act of resistance. And that's, for me, this defense of literature, of French, is something. She's 26 at that moment, and she did that. And
so it's quite an astonishing thing to have done. You say it's her first act of resistance, but then she would have many others in the years to come. So I would like to ask you to talk about this partnership that she had with Louis Jouvet, right? As his assistant, she went to the Conservatoire, she took notes on his classes. She also was there when he had meetings with set designers. And this you describe in the book as an astonishing kind of artistic and literary formation, a kind of training that she had that impacted her when she was later deported at Birkenau, in the fashion that she brought her gaze to the experience and the way in which subsequently she was able to write about that. So perhaps could you talk about Delbo's experience with the theater as Jouvet's secretary and how this impacted her later work and the kind of writing she was able to do?
And it's on different levels. First, she knew Jouvet because she was very fond of theater. She was very fond of literature since she was a young girl at school, but then even of theater. I discovered in her archives that 1 year before meeting Jouvet, she went twice in the same week to see a Molière play, and it was the same play. I don't see it was Fouquerie, no, or Malade Imaginaire. And she wrote on a cahier I found in the archives that it was boring at La Comédie Française. And we were so much laughing at the Studio des Champs-Élysées where Jouvet has his company. So even 1 year before she met Jouvet, she was very fond of his way of directing. And you know, he was a redécouvreur of Molière, so he had a comprehension, way of understand what is so about human experience in Molière's play. And he gave a revival with the interest with Molière. And that's a thing. So after, during 4 years, she attended with Jouvet his lessons twice a week at the conservatory. And her job was to take note of every sentence of Jouvet, because Jouvet, to learn to his students how to pronounce the verses, how to play, how to feel the characters, he talked even about 2 lines during the 2 hours of the lesson, and she may write 40 pages of notes about his comparisons, his images, to speak how Elvire has to speak to Don Juan, for instance. And he told Charlotte, it's necessary for me because I am a man who speak, and I speak and I give exact the way you have to play that verse, that word. And I need that you write that, because after I have to do conference on Molière, on the way of playing or things like that. So she gave, after she transcribed in a very well style what he said during the lesson. But what is important is what it means for her that she had in her ears before going to Auschwitz-Birkenau. This language, this classical language from 17th century with Molière, with Racine, 18th century with Marivaux, 19th century with Musset, and Charlotte, who came from an Italian immigrant family and who had this love that we may have for a language that we adopt in the family. And her mother came at 18 and she didn't talk French at that time. And Charlotte was very grateful that the mother spoke French to her 4 children. Her father, already her grandfather, came for economic reason in France from Italy. So she had a love of French, but especially for French literature. So she had all the rhythm, the way of the word résonne, sounds.
The way the word vibrated and resonated.
Exactly. And so it was her school, I would say. And that's a thing. And the other thing important with Jouvet, in 1939, in August 39, so just 2 weeks before the war, the beginning, Jouvet asked Charlotte to come to Golfe Juan, where he is with Madeleine Oseret, because Jean Zay tried to set up a Festival de Cannes, the first one, to be a response to the Festival of Venice that Mussolini set up. And it was cancelled because of the war approaching. So the American actors didn't came. So it was cancelled. So Jouvet was there and he wanted to work. He asked Charlotte to come. And he wanted, since some years, to transform characters from novels on stage. He did that with Jacques Copeau, with Dostoevsky. So he wanted to do that with, for instance, Julien Sorel from Le Rouge et Noir, Stendhal, and with Sim Taperty from a novel of Dickens. So during days and days, she came every day at his home, and they speak about how can we transform the I would say
character,
no, and the way of the author speak about Julien Sorel, and to transform it in action on a stage, and to have a réplique also, to have lines,
dialogue.
Exactly. And when Charlotte has her hotel in Vallauris, every evening Jouvet walked with her to accompany her to her hotel. And there is extraordinary pages in a book called Spectres, mes compagnons, Phantoms, my companions, which were published in United States before in France. Because of the translator who liked so much this text. And in that text she wrote, she speaks about this evening walk with Jouvet, and that they have together interlocuteur invisible.
Invisible interlocutors.
Voilà, invisible interlocutors. Thank you, Kathryn. Invisible interlocutors. And it will stay that with Charlotte. And she will, in the book, Spectres, mes compagnons, she will say how in the camp, not, I would say, not in Auschwitz itself, because there you didn't dream, as she said, you only has delirium. But when she could be able, after 5 months in Auschwitz, to go to the little camp from Raisko, which was a agrochemical laboratory, and she could work there. And there they have showers and
straw mattresses.
Well, straw mattresses, and so life began again. So she was able to fancy, to recover the capacity of fancy.
Of imagination.
Imagination, sorry, maybe, of imagination. And this lesson of Jouvet, what is extraordinary, that she put on the backstage was camp.
Against the backdrop of the camp, she put these fictional
characters. And even it was like that also in the book, she write about a character from fiction. It was Fabrice Del Dongo from La Chartreuse de Parme, because she loved so much Stendhal, who came in her cell in the prison, because another prisoner gave her the book by a on a string through the grate. Yes, because she was not unable and she couldn't even have any book from the library of the prison.
So night and thought, the prisoners weren't allowed any correspondence, any books.
So, and she reread La Chartreuse de Parme. And so she said Fabrice stayed in the cell. And she had, she treated him as a companion and as a character she looks on. It's always a distance. And how she said that in his silence, he had the sense of destiny, and that destiny may be ineluctable, unavoidable. Unavoidable. So, you know, this kind of mystery, this kind of capacity to transpose situations and dialogues, and I would say to make bigger the inside of yourself in inviting, invisible characters, and to have dialogues or to hear what they could tell you when you are in a camp. So to imagine what they could tell you, it means that you find, you agrandir, you make bigger your inside, your own secret life. And that for me is something very important that also you may find in her way to treat the reader of her books. Because Charlotte never gave a judgment in her book. She drew scenes, she depicts terrible scenes, but she never tell a judgment on the executioners. She describes what they do in what support the prisoners, but it is in the reader's brain to make the judgment. And I would say this respect with the reader, or a way of giving a place to the reader, is something for me very, very important. And especially with a subject like that, because at the same time, she gave us so violent scene. And even there is 3 pages where we have very few lines of a terrible scene of a woman tirée par des obstacles, dragged along by 2 SS in a pitiful conditions, and or a man and with the crocs, the teeth of the dog, accroché, crunch. His neck. No, in the bottom, and doing terrible things. And she said, try to look, try to see, look and try to see. And at the same time, she had these scenes so harsh to support. And at the same time, when it's tableau, where it's a longer scene with actions, she gave a place for the reader to give, to make his own place when you read it. You may have your own emotions, your own judgment, even if you are very much moved.
Even if you're very moved, you have the space to have your own thoughts about it. So maybe we could do another reading of a passage from the text, because I think it would be important to talk about the way you describe evolutions in Charlotte Delbo's writing about Auschwitz. So you describe her first book, None of Us Will Return, as completely without chronology.
Yes, because with our trauma of the experience of Auschwitz, so there was no chronologic
There was no
and
day,
no time.
no chronology, and also very little of the first person pronoun. It's very much narrated about the collective experience. And then when writing 20 years later, the other volumes, she finds a way to introduce these other components, the first person subjective position, time, a different kind of space. And so perhaps we can read the...
And she will find place to introduce subject our own feelings. Quand elle veut évoquer le jour du ruisseau, ce jour-là, la première chose qui la surprend, c'est de s'étonner de sa mémoire partielle. Rien ne revient, sinon l'image de l'eau. Ni ses camarades à qui elle donnait toujours le bras, ni l'appel du matin, la formation des rangs, le travail à effectuer ce jour-là. Seule une voix lui reste. La voix de Charlotte domine l'oubli, franchit le temps. Une voix revient, les cris articulés de la politique allemande qui les gardait. Et ce n'est pas l'effroi, non, mais la compréhension pour cette prisonnière, une ancienne socialiste, enfermée depuis l'avènement d'Hitler, rendue folle par tant de prisons successives et qui s'arrange, quand elle menace de ses coups les déportés, de frapper toujours à côté. Aucune terreur n'accompagne le souvenir du ruisseau. C'est sans doute cette absence d'angoisse qui ouvre la sensibilité de l'écrivain qui se met à questionner en toute liberté son souvenir. Elle prend son temps, plusieurs pages pour débusquer ce qui pourrait lui revenir de cette journée. Qui lui donnait le bras pour marcher comme chaque jour? Elle ne s'en souvient plus. Y avait-il de l'herbe autour du ruisseau? Elle ne s'en souvient plus. Elle ne cessera dans ce chapitre du ruisseau de parler de la défection de sa mémoire, de cette mémoire prodigieuse qui était pourtant la sienne, pour mettre en valeur l'image de l'eau, où elle trempait son corps dénudé jusqu'à la taille, et sa peau qu'elle frotte avec de la terre jusqu'au sang, pour laver son corps au-dessus de l'eau, baptême de vie, image inouïe dont elle fait sentir les fractions soudaines et heureuses dans la mémoire. Il y a une jubilation de ce souvenir, au point de dire son étonnement curieux quand elle découvre les ongles de ses orteils restés collés à ses bas, quand elle ôte pour la première fois depuis 67 jours. Que de rapports différents au temps et à la mémoire trouve Charlotte Delvaux quand elle écrit en 1969. En prenant le temps d'interroger ses souvenirs, elle insuffle du temps dans le récit, pour la première fois dans un chapitre sur Birkenau, alors que jusque-là, le temps était remplacé par la menace de la mort. La menace ôtait le temps. L'instant était toujours la possibilité de la mort. Maintenant, c'est le temps de l'écriture qui prend sa place. L'écriture qui s'interroge sur sa capacité à retrouver les images, à dire. Une écriture qui joue avec son pouvoir et montre sa liberté, et cela au moment où Delvaux évoque la renaissance de son corps de femme. L'impudeur de ces mots met au jour, dans la lumière des mots, le corps, que tant de menaces de mort avaient replié dans la souffrance et l'obscurité.
When she seeks to evoke the day of this dream, that particular day, the first thing that surprises her is how partial her memories are. She remembers nothing but the image of the water, not her comrades to whom she always gave her arm, not the morning roll call, not lining up in rows, nor the work they had to accomplish that day. Only one voice remains, the voice that for Charlotte Delvaux overcomes oblivion and transcends time. One voice returns, the shouts of the German political prisoner guarding them. And what she feels is not fear, but understanding towards this prisoner, a former socialist imprisoned since Hitler's rise to power, driven mad by so many consecutive prisons, yet who always makes sure to miss whenever she threatens to strike the deportees. No terror accompanies Charlotte's memory of this dream. This absence of worry opens up her sensibility as a writer as she begins to examine her memory in complete freedom. She takes her time, several pages, to unearth whatever might come back to her from that day. Who linked arms with her to walk that day? She no longer remembers. Was there grass around the stream? She no longer remembers. In this chapter, The Stream, she talks endlessly about the failings of her memory, despite how prodigious it was. She emphasizes the image of the water in which she immerses her body stripped to the waist, and her skin, which she scrubs with sand to the point of drawing blood in order to wash her body above the water, a baptism into life, an extraordinary image whose sudden and happy eruption in her memory she enacts. There is a sort of jubilation in this memory. She expresses curious astonishment to discover that her toenails are stuck to her stockings when she takes them off for the first time in 67 days. By 1969, Delbo's writing was constructing a completely different relationship to time and memory. By taking the time to examine her memories, she was breathing time into the narrative, even in a chapter on Birkenau. Until then, the threat of death had replaced all sense of time. Imminent danger had eliminated time. Each instant meant the possibility of death. Now, the time of writing has assumed its place, a form of writing that examines its capacity to recover images and to express them, one that experiments with its power and displays its freedom, and does all this just as Delbo evokes the rebirth of her body as a woman. The immodesty of her words brings her body into the light of day, into the light of her words, which mortal danger had previously relegated to suffering and darkness.
J'aurais bien aimé ajouter par rapport à
So you wanted to add something?
Yes, I would like to maybe to speak about her use of poetry. You know, there in scenes, among terrible scenes, suddenly she has the art to bring an image which gives us a space to be and to be human when you say so terrible things. First, I want also to specify, we didn't tell you that before, that when the convoy arrived in Auschwitz in the end of January 1943, it was a terrible moment for the prisoners, in the sense that for the German army, it was the first defeat since 1938 in Stalingrad this winter. So they were so angry of being defeated, stopped for the first time in Russia, that with their anger, they beat it on the most vulnerable, person, and among the 10th of February, so I would say 3 weeks after their arrival, the convoy arrives, they ask, no, they don't ask, they order to the 15,000 women to go out of the camp at 4 o'clock in the morning and to stand up to 4 o'clock in the evening when it was night. February, that means 25 degrees Celsius under zero, you may guess. And only standing up nothing moving in rank. It was a terrible thing, and that was because of Stalingrad, and to do something terrible. 14 of them lose life at that, from the convoy this day. And there are 3 chapters, I would say, or 3 different long scenes in the book, None of Us Return, about this terrible day. And there is a scene, particular scene, and it is a Jewish woman, because always in his book, Charlotte, who was not Jewish, but she insists to say in all her works that for the Jewish, the conditions that the Nazi did in the camp was much more worse than for the prisoners, Polish prisoners. The blocks were overcrowded.
They were separated, they didn't have the same language, and
Yes,
people next to them.
and they don't have the stripes
The striped clothing.
striped clothes, so they have terrible clothes. And so we understand it's a Jewish because she has terrible clothes, and the head is completely rasé, shaven, and she is already almost very near dying, and suddenly she quit. She's in delirium. She quit the rank, and she wants to cross a fossé, the ditch.
Little ditch. She gets out of the row and she wants to cross over.
Yes, in order to catch clean snow and to put the snow on her lips because she was so thirsty. And she couldn't even climb on the ditch. And she tried with her back, with her hands, legs, to help his body. And it was despair just to see that, and nobody moved. And there is 2 things, and Charlotte succeed to give also what may be the thoughts of this woman in her delirium. And she said that she looks to the woman there, and why don't you help me? Why don't you come to help me? And she put her fingers very long in a despair way of being. And suddenly, after such an effort, her hand fall down. And Charlotte has this extraordinary sentence: a faded mauve star on the snow. And I would like, when I read that, I appreciate so much this composition, I would say, about a sort of first the image of the star, because she wants help of freedom, and also the mauve is also the violet color of death, but it's a mauve is also a flower, and when it falls on the snow, there is suddenly a sort of smoothness, I would say. Gentleness, thank you.
Beauty, you even said.
Gentleness, and for me is a kind of homage.
Homage, yeah,
Homage. An homage to this woman. And in the same scene also, there is something I find very important. In the middle of the scene, because she has a sort of yellow jacket, yellow, it's a tissue, it was a coat in her life before, but
No, it's a red.
Yellow, and she's very, very thin because she has nothing to eat. And all her vertebral column, is
Spinal column.
may be seen. And suddenly Charlotte said, "Oh, Mummy, Flack is going to die." Flack was their dog when they was children. So in almost the sentences just after, this memory of the first time when she was a child and she saw that the death exists, came suddenly from her unconsciousness there. And she succeeded to juxtapose exactly this different level of conscience.
So Ghislaine, I think that example that you've given illustrates really beautifully a quality of this book, which is that it's a biography of sorts, a literary biography, but it is also a work of literary criticism sometimes, because you perform these really exquisite readings of Delbo's work and highlight really these kinds of juxtapositions that she makes, or the way in which, to answer François, who began by saying that it's no longer perhaps a taboo, or that taboo is outdated, and that taboo, of course, comes from Adorno, who said that it should be impossible to write poetry after Auschwitz, although he later qualified that. You know, this is actually really at the core of your book, is the attentiveness that you bring to how Delbo, at different moments of her life, is writing about the camps. How does she find in the memory of her dog's death that she came back to her at that moment, or in the memory of lines from Mulia that she has from her experience with Chule, how is she constructing at different moments an experience, a representation of this experience that we can receive? And I think really powerfully, you say many times that Charlotte believed in the capacity to make this visible, to make others see it, and to sensually experience it. And so I don't know what you think, Ghislaine and François, but perhaps we should open the floor. We could talk for hours about so many important things that haven't been said. About her representation of the Jews, and about the way that she stood up to Holocaust deniers, about
yes, because that we have to say.
But perhaps it will come up in a question, because I think we have about a quarter of an hour left. I think it's really important that we give them an opportunity.
Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. And what's really fascinating, yes, that's just what you said, Kathryn, is that we understand that it's not only a biography, but also we understand that it comes from a writer, because you are a writer, and it's not only the fact that you have such a beautiful writing in writing it, but also the fact that you think about what is writing about Auschwitz and what you said. That's all the layers, and that's fascinating, really, what you said. Yeah. So thank you so much. I would have as well, perhaps a naive question, but about where does this strength she had by surviving from Auschwitz, according to you, where did it come from her family background, or how was it possible that she was able to stand and to survive?
And your question was mine during a long time, because it's rather extraordinary how she survived and how she loved life after. She knew strong depressions, yes, but also I think that first her it was, and that was also my first chapter. I confront her to history with this 10 June of 1939, because always her mind, she tried to confront to history and political truths. And she followed from narrow, I would say, the Algerian War. So, and then even during what she wrote in the 70s, she wrote about the Chile, the child, you said child?
Chile. She wrote about the political situation in Chile.
Yes, in Chile and Morocco, and in Burgos, the Spanish Basque independent, about Greek with Calabrita, and so, and always what I appreciate so much, because it's not a political position like that. She's always, but elle se met en question. She asks questions to her or to the other companions, and to say, that we were prisoners, we know what is dictator, what is dictatorship. What do we do against that? She has the last text in this last book who were published after her death, Days and Memory in français, La mémoire et les jours, is about the Russian prisoners, the Soviet prisoners, and in Kolyma. She was very, very fond of the text from Shalamov and also Akhmatova. And she said, when we were Hitler's prisoners, we knew that once he will be fighted. He
will be defeated at some point. Everybody is working against it, but not in that.
But she said not in URSS. And what she thought in, it was in 51.
But Ghislaine, perhaps, I mean, you're right. I'm citing you when I say another reason that you give for her survival was also the incredible solidarity that the women had the opportunity to create amongst themselves when they were still in France, imprisoned at the Fort de Romainville, where they were for 4 months, and actually they were not separated at Birkenau. And then the communist movement was able to get them, some of them, to Rysco, where they had those better conditions. And so, and then also you talk so much about, you've said it today, about the need to have that inner self, to restore the inner self. And then she had, eventually at Ravensbrück, she could buy a copy from a gypsy of Molière.
She was the first to speak about what the, in the 70s, about what the gypsy, the Roma, supported.
What was done to the gypsies or the Roma women?
From the Nazi. She was the first in France to do a text. And it's three chapters, and it's terrible what she shows about the treatment of the Roma, and it's late in her life, and she wrote that. But if I have time, just for 4 minutes to read that.
It depends if how you feel, Courtney, if you have many questions or if it's okay.
No, there are no questions online.
So I wanted to maybe to answer also to your interesting question for Lachman. The letter she wrote to Jouvet 3 weeks after she's out from Ravensbrück. So after 27 months of deportation, of concentration camp, she's in Swedish, where the Red Cross brought her with her companions. So read May 17th, 1947. Dear Monsieur Jouvet, she wrote this letter. Interned in Sweden since April 26. I learned today that you are in Paris. I do not want to tell you about my long and terrible journey, nor do I want to explain to you now the reason that compelled me to leave you in Rio. We have talked about that several times since then, and you know. No, I want to tell you why I am coming back. I am coming back to hear your voice. I have endured the worst ordeals that destiny or the Gestapo could pile upon a poor average human. And my chances of surviving were slim. Reason and rational thought, statistics and daily observations, my every heartbeat, the heart that beat only because heart, yes, you're right, sorry. Heart that beat only because I ordered it to do so. Everything told me that struggle was futile. My intuitive certainty was based on something else. The protection you give me, both you and my mother. My mother, through the force of her determination and the vehemence of her thoughts that accompanied me, and because you spoke to me. I had extraordinary conversation with you. We talked about everything, about all the people we know, Alceste and Hermione, Electra and Dorian, and I have been closer to you these last 3 years than during the previous years when I hardly left your side. 3 years of meditating by turns with death and hope have given me the power to evoke and conjure up beings as they truly are. So one day, when I rushed toward you, standing in front of your mirror, and you dried your face so I could kiss you, you were removing your makeup and I felt traces of crease on your face. You told me, "So, little one, you have come back?" And I heard your voice, his exacting, so uniquely yours. And that very day, I was sure that I would return and see you again. From the depths of the Auschwitz swamps, it took miraculous tenacity for me to return. I am returning to embrace you. The beggar is God, he should know, Charlotte. But, it's a PS, but I still do not know when. Only Electra and I know what it means to wait. So for me, it's an extraordinary. And when you give this question some minutes ago, and you mentioned family also background. And I have to tell that the strength of her mother, Madame Delbaumer, was somebody extraordinary with such a will and with such a sense of justice, such a respect towards her children, and also a rather harsh education, a solid education. That was a very important thing. But as I read this letter in English, I would like to say also that I admire a lot Kathryn Lachman translation, because for me, she did a titan work to translate all this book. And she knew, and we had some exchange at the beginning of her work with the beginning pages, and I make her knowing that I would be very grateful if she could translate also the rhythm of my language. And I confess that I admire a lot the work. So I would like also be very interested that Kathryn speak a little bit about how you worked.
Well, thank you for the kind remarks about the translation. Well, I did the first version of the book reading as I worked. So I was reading and translating, and the effort was to bring the book, which is very large in French, it's 700 pages. So I wanted to bring it into English to have something in English. And then, as Ghislaine mentions, at the beginning, we had the opportunity to have one meeting. It was very poignant. It was in Berlin. And we had a conversation. I'm a musician by background. And Ghislaine had told me that she really wanted me to bring the book into the music of my English. And then, after exchanging the first 20 pages, she said, and the rhythm of my French. And I think this was really the challenge of the work, was to find the balance between the music of English, the rhythm of the work, and sometimes the awkwardness of the sentences was intentional because those sentences were performing. For example, a very long sentence was performing a train, or a very short fragmented sentence afterwards is performing the lack of breath. So that there was a kind of process for me over the course of the 4 or 5 drafts that I did of really finding that rhythm, actually allowing sentences to perform that kind of work. And I worked a lot at night. And I just would like to say finally that the project, the act of working with Delbo's story, but also with Ghislaine's words, I think has really profoundly transformed me, and in ways it inhabits me and it inhabits my experience. So Delbo famously said that language wasn't the same after Auschwitz, that words had really lost their meaning. And this is a powerful point made by many German writers, but made by her about what it means to talk about friendship or to talk about thirst. And I think it's not a trauma to have worked on this project, but it is a kind of habitation or just a consciousness that I think I'm honored to carry, to be honest, because it's an important history. So thank you, all of you, for coming out today, and to those on Zoom for being there. And thank you again to François and to Courtney.